Hello, everyone. My name is Hillary, and for today's interview, I am going to be interviewing Marie Garlock?
Yes.
Okay, Marie Garlock. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Marie just to very briefly describe her work, and then I'm going to ask her a question about it. So, hi. Thanks for doing this with me.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all for the work that you do every day.
So I thought very briefly, sorry for the, how short this video has to be, but could you just describe for everyone, what you're up to in your work?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm a dancer, a storyteller, a facilitator.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting my PhD in communication, and I focus on performance and also health and social change communication. Mm-hmm. So the main people I work with are people facing advanced cancers who become health justice advocates, often in very performance-centered ways, because of the fact that they faced cancers. And the portion that I think fits the best with the work that you all do and that I'm excited to talk with you and have a dialogue about is work through a thing called interplay. And this is a practice based in improvisational performance for people that think they do not perform. And it is not a therapy per se, but rather something that is based in performance creation for live audiences and building in this practice of creativity and witness. So it's based in storytelling practices in really unique ways and playful entries into that, in movement and dance, and importantly stillness, in voice and vocal practice and breath. Again, for people that think they may not do any of these things, if they do already have talents or experience with that, then they're welcome to bring that. That I've worked with groups of people who are facing cancer as patients and caregivers, as well as healthcare providers within this, and then also communities of people who are focused on social change issues, these very kind of entrenched social injustices around race and class and gender, and how all of those things tie into like toxic exposures and how that relates to cancer, and how people mobilize these knowledges around seemingly very stuck issues through this performance practice based in play, which seems counterintuitive, but perhaps not for this audience.
Yeah, I was going to say, no, that fits with me, but yeah, that is really exciting. Well, I feel like I could already ask you a million follow-up questions, but for the purpose of this interview, we're only allowed one. So the question I chose is, what are your thoughts on how participants can be meaningfully involved in defining what problems need to be researched?
Such a fabulous question.
I didn't write the question, but Neil was like, yeah.
Thank you for the question. So I think my thoughts on that go back actually to research methodologies that we use within communication studies. So based in oral histories and critical ethnographies, and then how those can influence something like interplay and where and how that's done and with whom. So critical ethnography is ethnography being research to gain cultural understanding of cultural phenomena that can be yourself, your own family, your neighborhood, or communities and cultural phenomena oceans away. And trying to gain an intimate understanding of that and then share that with others, so that there's these specificities that you kind of like move through this tunnel of specificity, you emerge on the other side and have a more specific understanding of larger cultural political phenomena. So I think ethnography is really helpful in that way. Critical ethnography is instead of looking at just what something is, instead you ask also, why is it that way? So looking at the political underpinnings of all modes of representation, cultural, scientific, all of it. How did it get to be that way? And so from interview practices and kind of being immersed through ethnography in communities of people who face cancer, I think is how a lot of the questions have developed, and just trying to really root deeply into listening practices. Something I understand is kind of listening in. And so, for example, I work with a partner with a cancer support group of a really diverse group of people that are patients, caregivers, who are all races and ethnicities, ages 20s to their 70s, all diagnoses of cancer. The way that people were invited in was an advertisement for a chronic stress management program through an oncology nurse who also had training in hospice and an MDiv. And he and I now sort of co-facilitate programming.
Okay.
And I actually became involved with this first as a caregiver.
Okay.
So my mom faced stage 4 cancer
Okay.
for almost 7 years,
Okay.
and she was a member in the group, and I came with her whenever I could.
Okay.
She has passed on out of her body, and it's just so wonderful for me to continue to be a part of that group.
Yeah.
So it's this really unique entry in where the main facilitator had to transition jobs, so he can visit kind of infrequently now, and they asked me to take over programming because I had done some interplay workshops with them. So this is a long answer to your question.
No, it's great. I think we're good. Oh, we are so good. You don't, I mean...
Yeah. So within this, just as essentially sort of listening through a support group model of social support, and this notion of positive social support. So what people in public health through various seminars I've taken while in graduate school, there's patient advocacy perspectives, health-related decision making, and the kind of science and practice and art of social support. So looking at social support as instrumental and also emotional, and having what's called social support effectiveness in terms of people's ability to actually not only just receive support but also give.
Okay.
And that is actually really rooted to our understanding of human dignity itself.
Yeah.
So if we assess dignity as human beings' ability to make choices about the situations that they're in, then contributing to others is what helps us really feel a value. And that is a very healing practice for people while they are ill. And that's something that I've witnessed in my mom's life and then in all the people's lives in this group. And continuing past the point of when they may have a family member, either a spouse or a parent. Often there's one person who had a child facing cancer. But among this diverse group of people, over time, there will be people who will pass on.
Right.
But they continue to be active members of this group. And that's so helpful and inspiring because their knowledge continues and they can honor their experiences themselves and also their loved ones' experiences by sharing with these other people what has been helpful to them. In concert with everyone's situation is different, but when someone comes with a particular issue to the group, then that, is addressed that time through all these multiple perspectives at once in this kind of equal footing. So from that, then these questions have developed around, well, what would an interplay workshop for people facing cancer look like? What would this performance-based modality for creative expression and witness look like? I think I worked with a woman who had, I'm not sure that at that point she had faced cancer in her own family, but she is a very expert interplay practitioner named Jenny Going, and she's here in the Triangle area. And I should say that if anyone wants to know more about interplay, you can go to interplay.org.
I was going to say, we'll do that at the end. We can do a plug.
Okay, great.
Yes,
and it was two people started it named Cynthia Winton Henry and Phil Porter, and they're fabulous. They're based in Oakland, California, and another mentor of mine in that practice has been a woman named Sharika Rahim, who focuses a lot on healing practices and the ways that interplay is relevant to communities of color. And I've been involved through an arts and social change leadership training for leaders 35 and under, so what they call their millennials program, fitting those sort of buzzwords of that's okay. We love it anyway. So within that, we were looking at, based on these cancer support group experiences, noting that probably a lot of the people in this weekend interplay workshop will be members from this group as well as others. How can we create programming that will address their experiences and their wisdoms? And so the premise of this was that we would have what we were calling a performance retreat. We're doing another one of these and in Asheville in the Western North Carolina in December, and then I'm doing shorter iterations for Duke hospitals in November actually. One exciting workshop for oncology healthcare providers.
Really?
By themselves.
We might need to talk more about that.
Because they need safe space.
Yeah.
And so actually this is helpful reflection time because I'm probably going to seek out people I know who are oncology healthcare providers and ask them what types of things do you want in prep for that workshop. And then a separate workshop for patients and caregivers together. And that is because it's really been shared by a lot of people that I've interviewed and asked, and just sort of been immersed in the worlds of, hey, we're sitting in, you know, our loved ones are sitting in the infusion chairs next to each other, and people start talking, of the fact that for a lot of families, the patients and the caregivers don't always feel that they can communicate openly with each other. And so I was lucky to be in a situation where I got born into a family where my mom ended up in my adult life being my best friend, and prior to that as well. And not every family gets that. Even members of my own family didn't get that and had to sort of choose their families. But because that happened, we were able to have really open communication with each other. And so these things that I saw work for us, I wonder how that can work for other people. And I've seen some people who also have that open communication, and then some who don't. And so it's how to build that possibility, because I've seen with various friends and colleagues the pain and the suffering that is caused when people aren't able to communicate openly. Yeah. And they feel like they're going to be a burden on their family members. And often those family members, the caregivers, want to know. And it is more hurtful to them when the information is withheld. And so trying to create that open communication through having a workshop that is patients and caregivers.
Got it. Okay.
Because often support group settings will be just caregivers or just patients, but through the interplay modality of storytelling, using that unique opportunity, engaging that to have those people share. Okay. Differently, the physicians, nurses, social workers who are in oncology settings and in the Duke Cancer Institutes where this will be, they often feel like they cannot share openly if there are patients and caregivers, because their experiences are so intense and kind of so relentless in that profession, those series of professions, that they want safe space to be able to share their unique stories of overwhelm, really, and compassion fatigue, and grief that doesn't have a container. Yeah. You know, it's like, well, you've just got to move on. Yeah. And that is not actually, as you all know so well, how human beings work. Yeah. So from that, linking back to this thing that happened in February of 2015, we sort of went through, well, what are things that we've been immersed in these cancer worlds, to develop the programming for this. So kind of and I can send you some of our program notes if that's helpful. But
so these were the facilitators. We're not talking about the participants. Okay.
But we had been around participants, in varying ways. So she had led, Jenny Going had led for many years, kind of 6-week series of journeys with cancer.
Got it.
And interplay for people. And she's been doing this for like 22 years. And you know, this was maybe 6 or 7 years ago that she led the last one. So we're coming back to that together. And then sort of I do interviews with people that are facing cancer and advocate for alternative forms of telling their stories to what the mainstream philanthropic models are that are about a future genetics-based cure in a vacuum separate from epigenetics. Those realities of toxics we're unequally exposed to. And then looking at, like, for example, mammograms and early detection conflated with prevention. And so there are these gaps then of people wanting to stop cancer where it starts and people wanting to increase health justice, health access, treatment access, and more dialogue-centered healthcare experiences. So within that, I'd been asking lots of questions of people. So I was sort of a vector of that information, but was constantly accessing it and creating the workshop model. And then kind of checked it with people going along.
Got it. So when you were doing those initial interviews to get the information, were those just open-ended interviews, or did you, like, was it, because I think, you know, thinking about the participants, making sure their voices are heard, which I know you do, it's like, you know, did you go in with a specific, you know, agenda, like, here are the questions I want to ask, or here's what I hope to get out of this, or was it more just open-ended, let's hear them? How did that work before you brought them in?
A lot of this in critical ethnographic research model is this practice that a woman, Sweeney Madison, calls deep hanging out. Okay. So that is the more open-ended form. So it was a mixed methods, I would say, of just the deep hanging out of just priorities that people bring up, and then maybe you're having a conversation with someone and you ask, would it be okay if I record this actually?
Okay.
You know, here's some of the stuff that I do.
Okay.
Or like maybe you had an ongoing relationship and you just happen to have a conversation, but it's like, oh, would this be okay if I do an audio recording right now? Or you take some notes and then you say, hey, I'm writing up this thing. Is it okay if I quote you on this? So like a just sort of immersion in these worlds, which were happening anyway. And then in addition, a set of questions that was made about community-generated messaging among cancer patients. So this study that I was a part of at UNC, just basically me and a professor doing like questions of people. Her name is Joan Cates in our interdisciplinary health communication program. And within this, asking questions about people's own perceptions on what their wisdoms and knowledges are on what stops cancer while they're in active treatment. Because that's a group of people that often are sort of skipped over. We look at preventing cancer or we look at chemo only once people are diagnosed. So those are questions around stress relief and chronic stress management and dealing with depression and anxiety, and things around nutrition and exercise and toxin exposure, but trying to look at those from a more systems level versus the individual. Because those can't be separated out if we look at it from a social justice justice perspective. So all of that is to say as we come toward our end of our 15 minutes.
I didn't mean to. That's okay.
Well, that within that we created this model within the interplay programming for cancer patients and caregivers and health providers. Okay, what are some of the main things that we want to elicit people's stories about? And then their priorities kind of guide how we develop this performance that we're sharing publicly at the end of the weekend. So it's like, what are the sort of absurd, kind of hilariously absurd experiences you have that people outside of cancer worlds are sort of like, oh, that's happening, we can't really talk about that. But like when you're going through things, these extreme treatments, and like just weird things that happen in people's bodies or, your own or your loved one. There's things that are like, you could laugh or you could cry or both. And so like inhabiting that space and the really interesting stories that people have when you say, what's one of the most absurd things that's happened? And then they get to tell that story. And you get these techniques of how to tell those stories incorporating movement or how to, create a story in only 3 sentences. Or how to create a story with movement, talking called DT3, dance talk times 3. So you have these methods and modes that occur in a workshop setting. You listen to what people's priorities are, and then together you kind of script, oh, well, I think this went well when we did these methods, these performance methods. So for a public performance tomorrow night, let's practice these things and see what happens and build those in the live performance.
Very cool. Oh my gosh, we could talk for so long about this.
No, you don't have to edit.
No, that's okay. We'll cut it up soon so I don't have to edit. But for more information, this is Marie Garlock. And what website should they go to for Interplay stuff or your work or anything?
Interplay is interplay.org. The group that I work with in North Carolina is Interplay NC. I also just got to co-lead a workshop with Pavitra Vasudevan with the NC Environmental Justice Network. And we were working with people facing illnesses because of unequal toxic exposures, targeted because of being African American mainly in North Carolina, but also Latino communities, and the ways that they are mobilizing their body knowledges, their intergenerational storytelling, and performance activism because they have faced illnesses. And so that's ncejn.org. And so I think I shared interplaync.org. And lastly, if you happen to want more information on these sorts of things and flyers for this sort of stuff, itisinyu.org is the project that I work on. itisinyu.org. And thank you all.
Thank you. Until the next episode. Thank you. That was awesome.